All right. Just give people a few moments to start filtering in here. So everyone joined us. I just want to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us today. We're very glad that you were able to join us for this session as part of Invasive Species Action Month. Before we get started, I'd just like to take a moment for a land acknowledgement. Here at the Invasive Species Council of BC, we do operate across the province and gratefully acknowledge the territories of Indigenous peoples of BC, where we live and work to maintain healthy ecosystems for all, and recognize that these lands are still home to many diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, and we express our gratitude to them who have stewarded and continue to steward these lands since time immemorial. Personally, I'm grateful to be joining you here today from the unceded traditional territory of the Ktunaxa, where I enjoy connecting with my own passion for the land and then finding others for an opportunity to share that passion with them. I think that helping people strengthen their connection with the land is one of the most meaningful parts of this work. I'm very thankful that we can come together in this spirit. Now, Invasive Species Action Month, or ISAM, is a province-wide campaign that happens every May. And actually, this year it has expanded nationally. ISAM raises awareness about invasive species and the simple, practical steps we can all take to stop their spread. They affect ecosystems, economies, cultural practices, and everyday activities, but small changes can make a big difference, and those everyday decisions matter. And that's where the message behind the 2025 theme came: small actions, big impact. That's things from rinsing off your kayak, which I'm sure we'll go over today, to planting native species in your yard, small things you can do to help prevent that spread of invasive species. Now, across BC, those simple actions will add up to healthier ecosystems, stronger food systems, and communities that are just better equipped to protect what they love. Each week during May, we highlight a different theme tied to those real-life actions, and this week's focus is on the water, so keeping lakes, rivers, and wetlands invasive-free. And aquatic invasive species can spread easily between those different water bodies, often by hitching a ride on boats, gears, fishing equipment, which we'll go into more depth shortly. But before we dive into today's presentation, I'd just like to say thank you to EnviroGreen for supporting knowledge sharing during ISAM. And also want to recognize that webinars like this are made possible thanks to support from all kinds of donors, members, and partners. And we'll share a link in the chat where you can learn how to support our work. Quick note on today's format: if you are experiencing technical issues, please use the chat box, and Megan, running tech support, will do her best to assist you. If you have any questions during the presentation, type them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll take some time at the end to answer those questions. If we run out of time, though, we'll share the questions and answers by email afterward. And yes, this recording will be available on YouTube afterwards if you'd like to rewatch it, or if you have to step away or you want to share it with your network. With all that out of the way, I'm excited to introduce today's speaker. Martina Beck is the Freshwater Applied Science and Invasives Unit Head with the BC Ministry of Waterland and Resource Stewardship, and she oversees the ministry's science and strategic policy for aquatic invasive animals, including the shared delivery of the BC Invasive Mussel Defense Program with the Conservation Officer Service. Martina completed her Master of Science Studies in Aquatic Invasive Species Research at the University of Victoria and brings a wealth of experience in understanding and managing those threats posed by aquatic invasives in BC. Please join me in welcoming Martina.
Yes, we're now in the afternoon, so I can say good afternoon and thank you, Craig. And I just want to start off by acknowledging with gratitude that I'm joining you this afternoon from the traditional territory of the Lekwungen people here in Victoria, where the sun is now shining after some rain this morning. So I'm just bringing up my screen here just to confirm, Craig, you can see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So as Craig mentioned, I'll be focusing today to talk about aquatic invasive species. In the interest of time, I'll focus in on just a few priority species because I did really want to keep the most of the focus on kind of talking about prevention tools and kind of key practices to help prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species. And so when I refer to aquatic invasive species, what are we talking about? So these are species that are not native to the province or outside of their natural distribution, and they can negatively impact British Columbia's environment, people, and/or economy. And this can range from aquatic plants, aquatic invertebrates, fish. And so this is where these species are known to be very prolific invaders and can have negative impacts, as I mentioned, to the environment, people, and economy. And in British Columbia, our top aquatic invasive species priority is the zebra and quagga mussels. I'll be focusing in on zebra and quagga mussels, as well as a few other priority species. And for those who may not be familiar with zebra and quagga mussels, they are a freshwater mussel. They're native to Europe. They are two very closely related species from what's known as the Dreissenidae family. And they were first introduced into North America, into the Great Lakes in the late 1980s via ship ballast water. What's made them such a prolific invader is that they have characteristics that allows them to be spread across all life stages. So they have a larval veliger stage, which is microscopic, and it can be present in the water column for up to 30 days. And so this means that this stage of their life cycle can be spread through water. So water that's taken up from a body of water where mussels are present can then be transported and then introduced into a new water system, hence how they were introduced via ship ballast water into the Great Lakes. As juveniles and adults, they have the ability to attach onto solid surfaces. So this can include boats and different types of water equipment and infrastructure. And as well, depending on environmental conditions, water or air temperature and humidity, they can survive out of water for up to 30 days. So once attached onto a boat, they can be transported overland and then introduced into new waterways. So because of these characteristics, since they were introduced into the Great Lakes, as you can see from the map here on this slide, they have unfortunately since spread quite widely and moved west from Eastern North America. However, they haven't been introduced into all provinces and states in North America. So they have not yet been detected in Saskatchewan, Alberta, or British Columbia, as well as they haven't been detected in Washington, Oregon, Wyoming, or Montana. And so there's a lot of efforts to prevent their spread, prevent their introduction in these jurisdictions, and prevent spread in areas where they have been introduced. And those are photos of the mussels on the bottom of the screen. But the other piece that makes them easily sort of spread through overland movement is that they start attaching onto solid surfaces when they're very small in size. So up to only just half a grain of rice in size is when they can first start attaching onto boats and equipment. This picture here shows a propeller of a motor that is heavily infested with mussels. Some are quite visible, but there's others that will be really small when they're first attaching. So they can go easily undetected when they're attached onto boats and equipment. This map here just shows from our watercraft inspection stations that I'll talk about in a minute, showing the movement of boats overland. So it shows just how far and wide boats are being transported overland in North America, and of course then could be a potential vector for their spread. In terms of why we're so concerned about these mussels being spread and introduced into new places is they can have potential significant impacts to our environment and our economy. So once they're introduced, they spread very quickly. They reproduce very quickly. A single female can produce up to 1 million eggs in a spawning season. And once they are introduced, they outcompete with our native species for food and habitat. So as you can see on this infrastructure, they will overtake the infrastructure. The same applies in the aquatic environments where they can overtake habitats and outcompete with our native mussels that we have here in BC. In terms of some key economic potential concerns in the Columbia River watershed, a key concern is potential impacts to hydropower facilities. And in 2023, our ministry completed an updated economic impact assessment of what it would cost if zebra or quagga mussels were to be introduced into British Columbia. And that assessment looked at impacts to hydropower, agriculture, irrigation, municipal water supplies, recreational boating, as well as tourism and property values. And that updated economic impact assessment for mitigation costs was estimated to be between 64 to 129 million per year if zebra quagga mussels were to be introduced into BC. So we know that our prevention efforts come at a fraction of the cost of what it would be if they were to be introduced into BC. So that's why the prevention tools that I'll be talking about today are so important to protect not only our environment, but our economy from invasive mussels and other aquatic invasive species. So because of this known risk of zebra and quagga mussels, in 2015, the province launched the Invasive Mussel Defense Program. There's three main components to the program. We have watercraft inspection stations that are located at key entry points into the province along our Alberta border, as well as the southern US border. And these inspection stations are checking boats as they're entering the province and ensuring that they're free of mussels and clean, drain dry, and free of other aquatic invasive species. The other component of the program is early detection lake monitoring. So sampling our lakes for checking for zebra and quagga mussels. To date in BC, there's been no positive detections in our waterways. And the third and final component is outreach and education. And I'll really be focusing in on this area in the second portion of my presentation and talking about what are some key measures to help prevent the spread of invasive mussels and other aquatic invasive species. And I did want to just acknowledge that this program is very much a result of many partnerships that far exceeds those listed on this slide here, but a particular recognition to our program partners, in particular program founding partners, Columbia Basin Trust, Columbia Power, BC Hydro, and Fortis BC, who have been founding program funders, as well as contributions through the Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation, Pacific Salmon Foundation, and BC Wildlife Federation. And also really want to acknowledge that it's very much a cross-ministry delivery. So as Craig mentioned, work closely with the BC Conservation Officer Service in the co-delivery of the Invasive Mussel Defense Program, as well as we've received support through Ministry of Agriculture and Food. And certainly the partnerships extend far beyond those listed here, not only in terms of partners here in British Columbia, but we work really closely with our neighboring jurisdictions, both in Western Canada and the US. And I'll talk about some of those partnerships shortly. So just to give a sense, I mentioned those watercraft inspection stations are located at key entry points into the province. So this map here is showing our inspection station locations from 2024, and we are planning for same level of operations and locations more or less for this season's boating season. So same level of operations, we're planning for 50 inspectors this year, and we just completed our inspector training at the beginning of May, and we now have our watercraft inspection stations operational for the 2025 season. And so these stations, as I mentioned, are targeting at key entry points into the province and are operational from early April to late October to target the boating season. And we have increased operations over the kind of key summer months between June and August when we see kind of the most boating traffic occurring. And this is just a quick snapshot of the inspection data from our watercraft inspection stations. And this shows a snapshot from the last 2 years. And last year, we had just shy of 25,000 inspections. And we did intercept 12 mussel-fowl boats through those inspections. So that's where boats were identified to have zebra and or quagga mussels. And another metric that we track every year is those interactions with the public to help raise awareness about invasive mussels and clean, drain, dry. And so last year we had around 45,000 interactions with the public. I won't go into too much more detail on our inspection data because I did really want to focus in on the prevention tools, but we do have, and I'll share the link to our program website at the end, but we do have all of our detailed inspection data results posted through our program reports. And so we have a summary document from 2024 posted, and our full annual report will be coming, will be posted once it's available. So, but we have all of our past seasons reports and data available on our program website. And just to quickly touch on our lake monitoring. So As I mentioned, a component of the program is testing our lakes for invasive mussels. And so we identify priority water bodies for monitoring based on water bodies at increased risk of introduction and where mussels have the potential to survive and establish if they were to be introduced. And so this map shows the locations that were monitored in 2024. So we had 869 plankton tow samples collected from 87 priority water bodies. And I really want to acknowledge that this is very much partnership with many regional invasive species organizations who are key partners in collecting those water samples. And those samples are then sent to a designated ministry lab for analysis using a specific microscopy analysis. And as I mentioned, to date, there's been no positive detections through our monitoring program. So I just wanted to touch on a few other priority AIS and aquatic diseases before moving into some prevention tools. And first, I wanted to touch on whirling disease from an aquatic disease perspective. So for those who aren't familiar, whirling disease is an infectious disease of finfish that's caused by a parasite. So the parasite is Myxobolus cerebralis, bit of a tongue twister. And it's a parasite that actually has a two-host life cycle. So it requires both a salmonid fish species as well as a freshwater tubifex worm as its host. What happens is spores are released into the environment from the tubifex worm, where the parasite is present in those spores, and they're taken up by fish, and certain salmonid species are more susceptible than others. So for example, rainbow trout and cutthroat trout are more susceptible species, and in particular, juvenile fish are most susceptible. And when the spores are taken up by susceptible fish species and juveniles, the parasite will invade the cartilage and brain of those fish, and it can lead to impacts, and signs include deformities of the spine. So it can lead to spinal deformities because they're impacting the cartilage. And this can actually cause fish to swim in a whirling pattern. And other clinical signs is a blackened tail. So here you can really see that deformed spine. The blackened tail isn't as present here, but I'll show that in another photo shortly. But in terms of potential impacts by whirling disease, it can really vary depending on the population and species. In terms of, there are no human health concerns for consuming fish or drinking water where whirling disease is present. And unfortunately, there is no treatment currently available. So really, containment and prevention are the best response. And in terms of where whirling disease is present, it's been detected in 25 US states, and it was first detected in Canada and Alberta in 2016. And the first detection now in BC occurred in December of 2023 in Yoho National Park. And following that detection in BC, we've been working closely with Parks Canada as well as the Canadian Food Inspection Agency on different components of response. And I'll talk about some of those shortly. And we have a number of resources that are available on our whirling disease website, and I'll share that link shortly. But certainly there's a reason for highlighting whirling disease in particular is there's a lot of parallels in terms of prevention tools that are both effective for whirling disease as well as invasive mussels and other aquatic invasive species, and that's through clean, drain, dry, which I'll talk about in a moment. I'll just quickly touch on, for whirling disease, focus of the response was on surveillance last year. So following the detection of whirling disease, and it was in Emerald Lake in Yoho National Park, which is just highlighted here in yellow. We focused expanding surveillance to within the Columbia River watershed. And the points here on the map in yellow and green show where samples were collected. And through that was a partnership of working with local First Nations on sampling, as well working with Parks Canada and CFAA, as I mentioned. And we did have 3 trout samples that were taken from tributaries into the south arm of Kootenay Lake in Boulder Creek, Duck Creek, and Goat River that did come back positive for the parasite. that causes whirling disease. We don't know if those detections are at all related to the detections in Emerald Lake. And we don't know if these are new detections or if the parasite may have been present in the system already. And so we also don't know whether it means that there is an infected population. The parasite is present. We haven't seen reported signs of fish with clinical signs. So it's still understanding what that could mean. And we're in the process of looking at priorities for surveillance for this coming year. The other emerging threat that I did want to touch on is the golden mussel. So this is another species of freshwater mussel. It's native to parts of China and Southeast Asia. And it was first detected in North America just last year in October in California. So the detections in California was the first of the golden mussel in North America. And why this species is of particular concern is that it has a lot of the same characteristics as zebra and quagga mussels in terms of their size, potential impacts, that ability to attach onto solid surfaces. However, they have some characteristics that actually make them potentially even more in terms of their characteristics that enable them to survive in some conditions where zebra and quagga mussels couldn't. So, for example, calcium, their tolerances are lower than that of zebra and quagga mussels, so they may be able to survive in more water conditions than zebra quagga mussels, and they do have some ability to survive in some brackish environments. So this is one that we are monitoring closely and working closely with our counterparts in both California and across the Western provinces and states to certainly have this one as a species that we're on the alert for. We did develop a invasive species alert sheet that is available on our provincial invasive species website, and I'll share links to resources to those at the end. And now I wanted to focus in on some key prevention tools for preventing the spread of not only these priority aquatic invasive species and diseases, but other aquatic invasive species. I unfortunately couldn't go into a full review of all AIS, but these are tools that can help prevent the spread. And really the kind of foundational and key practice that we really want to encourage all boaters and water recreationists to use and to practice is clean, drain, dry. So this is really central to preventing the spread. As I mentioned, zebra and quagga mussels have a microscopic larval stage that can be transported in small amounts of standing water in boats. And so ensuring that boats are fully clean, drained, and dried can really ensures that helps to prevent the movement of those species. Even if a boat looks like it might be clean other than having a bit of water in it, there could be unknown species that you can't see visually that may be present in some of those areas. So the first step being cleaning, so removing any visible signs of things like mud, sand, or plant materials. We also want to make sure we're not moving any aquatic invasive plants. And as much as possible, rinsing off and cleaning off the boats and water equipment. So it may not just be boats, it can also be things like waders and other water equipment that could also potentially have invasive species attached. And then the second step being draining, so ensuring that all compartments of boats and equipment are fully drained. I'll talk about a specific step that's now a requirement for this in the next slide. And then the last piece is dry. So we found that, ensuring that equipment is fully dried for as long as possible. And of course, this becomes easier when you're in the warmer months of the summer, but allowing equipment and boats to dry between uses whenever possible also then helps to minimize the risk that those species could still be viable, even if they're, again, not visible and things may look clean. It just further reduces the risk if everything is fully dried. So a key step as part of the draining step of clean, drain, dry is pulling the plugs. So ensuring that drain plugs and valves are fully open and allowing all water to be drained. And last year in 2024, an order was issued under the Animal Health Act that actually prohibits boats to be transported overland with the drain plug in place. So we call this the pull the plug requirement. So it is now a requirement if you're transporting your boat overland in BC to have the drain plug removed. So this applies to boats that have drain plugs. So if you have a more simple non-motorized boat that doesn't have a drain plug, the pull the plug requirement doesn't apply, but we still certainly encourage practicing the clean, drain, dry and ensuring compartments are fully drained and dried. But for those boats that specifically have a drain plug, it is now a requirement to have that removed when you're moving your boat overland in BC. And a few other best practices for preventing the spread. So I talked about our watercraft inspection stations. It is mandatory to stop at any open inspection station along your travel route. So regardless of whether you're coming into BC or you're just moving your boat within BC, if you pass one of our inspection stations, it is mandatory to stop. And this does apply to all types of boats. So whether it's a trailer motorized boat or a stand-up paddleboard, canoe, kayak, it's mandatory to stop at all inspection stations. Other best practices is never moving fish or fish parts. This is really important in particular for whirling disease because movement of infected fish could be a potential mechanism for the spread of that parasite, as well as avoiding the use of felt-soled waders. So really encourage using rubber-soled waders. That felt bottom can be a potential mechanism to move really small aquatic invasive species that just might be in small amounts of mud or water. Spores from whirling disease could potentially be transported that way. And then using fish cleaning stations where they're available and just making sure not to dispose of fish or fish parts down a kitchen garburator. So just ensuring that they're put in a solid waste system to prevent any potential chance that it could get into a natural waterway. I just wanted to quickly touch on differences between clean, drain, dry versus decontamination. This is a question that we do often receive in terms of what is the difference. And in terms of clean, drain, dry, this is a preventative step that we encourage all boaters and water recreational users to use anytime you're moving a boat or equipment between water bodies. So whether that's just moving between local water bodies here in BC or bringing a boat in from another jurisdiction, it's a best practice that we just encourage to be kind of routine every time you're using boat or equipment. Decontamination is when you have a known risk that a boat could be transporting zebra quagga mussels or another aquatic invasive species. So for example, at our inspection stations, if we identify that a boat is coming from a jurisdiction that is high risk mussel infested, then we will take additional steps to do not only a full inspection, and depending on the outcome of that inspection, then we may determine that a full decontamination is required. And I'll talk about a little bit about what that decontamination involves, but it does require specialized equipment and trained staff, whereas clean, drain, dry is meant to be a practice that anyone can do when they're leaving a water body. In terms of decontamination for invasive mussels, so it does require specialized equipment, most commonly using pressure washers that deliver high heat. So for invasive mussels, it's actually hot water, so specific temperatures 140 and 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Apologies, there's a typo there. It says Celsius. It meant to say Fahrenheit. And a specific contact time that is what kills the mussels. And so because it requires operating specialized equipment at high heat and high pressures, this is something that is done by trained inspectors. So through our invasive mussel defense program, we have our trained inspectors that can perform the decontamination specifically for boats that are identified as high risk for transporting invasive mussels. And certainly this is also effective for other aquatic invasive species, but it is really targeting at invasive mussels. So that's where if you are bringing your boat into BC and you're not sure if your boat needs to be decontaminated, then really encourage you to contact the program. Our program inbox here, the cos.aquatic.invasive.species@gov.bc.org. And our inspectors will respond right away. Those notifications get forwarded to all of our field inspectors, and someone will respond and make contact to determine if your boat is potentially high risk. and if additional steps need to be taken for inspection and decontamination. And it's free, so you can have a nice clean boat after the process as well, which is always the goal, is for boats to be nice and clean when they're being transported between water bodies. And then I'll just quickly touch on decontamination for whirling disease, because it is a separate protocol that has been established. So following the first detection of whirling disease in BC, we did look closely at resources that were developed by Alberta following the detections in Alberta. And so we have established a decontamination protocol that is being recommended to be used when you're recreating within the Columbia River watershed. So it's outlined there just on the map in terms of the kind of southeastern part of the Kootenays and Okanagan part of the province, just based on that identified risk from the detections in Yoho National Park. So really encourage following this protocol. And this is one that we're encouraging the public, because it doesn't require specialized equipment like what is needed for invasive mussel decontamination. So it's more readily accessible in that it involves the use of a bleach or quaternary ammonium compound, or Quat Plus, which are something that can be readily accessible through sort of your local hardware or grocery store. And we have the protocol available on our whirling disease website in terms of the concentrations to use for how to spray down or soak boats and equipment. Certainly need to be mindful of following the necessary safety and disposal protocols, and certain types of equipment, it may not be suitable to use, of course, something like bleach, because it can be corrosive. So we do include some more information about that in our in the protocol that's available on our website, that's linked here. So and of course, this is recommended in addition to always following the clean, drain, dry as kind of being the kind of main step to be done. And then I'll just quickly highlight that a recent report came out that provides a really nice summary of kind of the differences between decontamination versus kind of cleaning or clean, drain, dry. And it also provides an overview of some newer kind of methods and technology that's come forward as potential tools for either clean, drain, dry. So for example, CD3 systems versus some other decontamination methods that have come forward. The most common that I mentioned is the pressure washers, but additional technologies have come forward in recent years, and this provides a nice kind of summary of when they may be kind of most appropriate to use. And so, and it talks about the difference between tools that can be used for clean, drain, dry. So that being something like a kind of self-serving cleaning tool, but that these cleaning tools are different from an actual decontamination, because in the instance in particular for invasive mussels, we really need that hot water and those specific contact times to effectively kill the mussels. And so the cleaning tools are great as a preventative mechanism to help prevent the spread, but it is separate from what's needed to complete a full decontamination. And so this is a great kind of resource that provides a summary of that, and it's available at the westernais.org website. So I know certainly there's been lots of questions about potential tools for clean, drain, dry, and certainly we want to reduce the barriers to be able to, practice clean, drain, dry. And so, where there can be different tools and resources to help enable clean, drain, dry for everyone when they're, again, something that we want to encourage after every use. So there are different mechanisms that can be used to help encourage that. So lots of new resources that are starting to come forward, which is really great to see. And finally, I'll just finish up with some resources and reporting tools. So first, for invasive mussels, this here is our program website. I mentioned earlier that we have lots of our past program reports posted there, as well as the program website that I mentioned. Our inbox is linked there, as well as we have information about our lake monitoring, and clean, drain, dry is all available on our program website. And For reporting any suspected invasive mussels, we encourage that to be reported through the Report All Poachers and Polluters RAP line through the BC Conservation Officer Service. And in terms of resources for whirling disease, if you do observe fish that is showing clinical signs of whirling disease, so I mentioned that deformed spine, swimming in a whirling pattern, the blackened tail, do not remove or transport the fish, because if it is potentially infected with whirling disease, we don't want to risk that spread. And instead take photos or video and then submit them to our whirling disease at gov.bc.ca inbox. And that goes to our program specialists who will do the necessary follow-up. And then as well, I mentioned the whirling disease protocol is available on our program website. We also have an information brochure that's available. And so again, lots of additional resources on whirling disease and talks about clean, drain, dry and those best practices on our website as well. And then lastly, I just want to mention we do have a reporting app. So for reporting all invasive species, whether it's plants, animals, terrestrial or aquatic, we have our invasive species reporting app that's available for download. iPhones, Androids. We really encourage submitting photos whenever possible, and as much information about location, date, and details of what you think maybe if you think it might be an invasive species, really encourage reporting it. And again, that gets forwarded to all of our specialists to look at species identification and any necessary next steps. And with that, I will stop there and if there's time for questions.
Thank you, Martina. Yeah, we have a few questions here. First one here is around the golden mussel, and just wondering if BC is part of California's golden mussel response framework for resource updates, up-to-date overland detections, etc.
Yeah, so we have been staying closely connected with California. So through several of the existing working groups that we sit on that span across Canada and the US, we have been receiving regular updates from California in terms of their kind of response framework and next steps that they're planning. So that's through, we sit on the Western Regional Panel, as well as through other groups like the Columbia River Basin. We've been receiving regular updates from California.
I think I'll bias on this topic a bit. I started with the Invasive Mussel Defense Program as an Easter egg if people want to view the recording after on YouTube. I am in one of the photos. But along those lines, then, I know that for the time I was there, I've seen some things, but have you seen any shifts in like public awareness or attitudes towards AIS over the last few years?
Yeah, so we certainly do. Part of the data that we collect at the inspection stations is awareness of aquatic invasive species and the program. I think generally it has remained relatively stable between the years. I wouldn't say we've seen significant drops. And so certainly, if anything, I'd say it's generally trending upwards. I don't think I've seen it drop by too much. It's interestingly remained relatively stable, I would say, just in the margin of a few percentage either up or down, but no sort of significant shifts. The other area that we do track is the compliance at our inspection stations with stopping. That is one that we've seen I would say a steady increase in compliance. Last year, we saw it jump by 3%, which was kind of the largest single year increase we saw. So certainly good to see it trending in that direction. So that is another area that we do track as well.
I think that kind of ties into another question I have here. And you addressed it a bit. You kind of said that, things like kayaks still need to stop at these stations.
Absolutely.
But for in general, what are kind of the biggest public misconceptions around either invasive mussels, whirling disease, or just AIS in general?
I'm in terms of misconceptions, I think probably more just from an awareness perspective. When I mentioned kind of tracking compliance with stopping at the inspection stations, we do still see the majority of those boats that aren't stopping are the non-motorized, so canoes and kayaks. So I think kind of a big message is just around that. As I mentioned, the mandatory to stop applies to all types of boats. So while, certainly more complex boats like motorized trailer boats do have, an elevated risk. There is still risk with your simple non-motorized canoes and kayaks. And so that's where just, I think, spreading the message that the stopping at the inspection stations and, applying the kind of key preventative steps through the clean, drain, dry is equally important for all types of kind of boats and water equipment. So I think that would probably be the more we can share that messaging around, applying those best practices and stopping at the inspection stations to kind of all types of boats is certainly, I think, an important messaging.
Yeah, I think even when I was years I was there, I remember I think it was the station near Fernie had kayak came
Mhm.
in with them.
Exactly. Yeah, we have seen and other jurisdictions, while it's not as many as the more complex boats, we do still encounter I think it's a few other jurisdictions as well. I've seen kayaks that have actually been mussel fouled. So
I think my final question then is just more so around your role. It seemed like very widespread, but what kind of brings you the most satisfaction or the most interesting thing about your work around AIS?
It's a great question. I think it's a very dynamic area with a lot of different applications and seeing the intersects in terms of how it can touch so many different areas in terms of where there can be potential impacts and wanting to share that messaging about kind of the importance of taking those steps. And I think certainly one of the unique aspects that's been really great to work with for me personally is the intersect of working with the Conservation Officer Service and that joint intersect between the kind of science, which is obviously where my background comes from, and then that intersect with the enforcement and seeing that that role has been really rewarding to see that a kind of shared delivery of the program.
Yeah, I think that was one thing I liked as well, even though, the butterfly people, the more science people were, it was still a lot of fun there. But I want to thank you, Martina. I went a bit over time here and thank everyone for sticking around. I think it's really clear that protecting our lakes, rivers, wetlands, all our water bodies really starts with that simple, informed action. And I think your presentation gave us a lot of that practical science-based look at how we can all help. I appreciate the knowledge you shared, as well as the critical work you and your team are doing to protect freshwater ecosystems. And to everyone watching, I also want to thank you for being part of Invasive Species Action Month. Today does mark the final webinar in our 2025 series. But learning doesn't have to stop here. If you missed any of our early sessions, you can catch them on YouTube, and this one should be up shortly. Again, you could try and find that Easter egg. And if you found today's session valuable and want to help us out, provide more tools or resources, we do invite you to support our work. Even a gift of $5 helps us continue offering free accessible programming that helps empower people across BC to help stop that spread of invasive species. And we'll drop that donation link in the chat again so you can see how to get involved. But overall, I want to thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you at future events. And you can keep up to date or check up on things that you may have missed about ISAM at bcinvasives.ca/ISAM 2025. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.